Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 59 of Casual Watch Talk. And Chris is on vacation this week, so I've got a new co-host just for this week, and it's Ben from Ben's Watch Club. Thanks for joining me, Ben.
No problem at all, Sam. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's an exciting new audio opportunity for me, I guess.
Yep, so we'll be in audio and video for this episode. So Ben, give us an intro to your channel. I know it's one of my favourites, but for anyone that's not familiar with you.
So my channel's just called Ben's Watch Club, named after myself, Ben. On my channel, we generally explore the world of affordable watches. We're on a quest to find the ultimate best value for money watch, essentially, as well as covering some other highly hyped up options that maybe don't quite deliver.
Yeah, I think I definitely enjoy the ones where like the Paganis and things like that, where you give them a really proper review instead of somewhat glowing ones that you see maybe on a few other channels. But
yeah, we try and be 100% transparent. That's the name of the game in my channel. Well, I say no bias, as little bias as possible, and certainly no BS.
Well, let's kick this off with Chris and I like to do a wristwatch check to start with. So, what are you wearing today?
Well, funnily enough, I'm wearing a Casio. Let me see if I can get a good shot of that for the viewers. I recently reviewed this. I think it's the most recent review as of recording this. The code for it, absolutely terrible code from Casio, so I think it's LCWM100TSE-1AER. I'm impressed with myself for remembering that.
And for our audio listeners, it's a Annie Digi, isn't it? But more like a sort of sports watch, kind of
it's like
formal watch.
Grey analog digital, yeah. It's really nice looking watch, actually. It's titanium, feels a bit light, so you may think it feels a bit cheap at first, but when you got it on wrist, it's really comfortable. Looks great as well for considering the price. What about yourself?
Well, yeah, so our main topic, if you've not guessed it by now, and I've probably put this in the title anyway, is going to be talking about Casio watches. And I've not covered a lot on my channel, although I'll talk about some of my original videos when I started out on YouTube that were Casio. But I'm wearing my grandfather's Casio watch. It's a LCD watch from 1976. And it is still going strong. Regular viewers, you see it in all of my collection reviews. The only thing that's gone on it is the tiny little bulb that it has. But I'm amazed. I mean, I can't imagine even when Casio made this in the 70s that they'd imagine that it would last till, 2021.
Wow, that is insane. That was almost 50 years of service. And that's a very early one for that type of technology as well, really.
When my granddad bought this, when it first ever came out, and this is probably the theme that we'll be having with Casio, but in the 70s when Casio bought these LCDs out, it was like a revolution, I think, in the watch world.
Absolutely. I mean, I was actually looking up about this the other day, the history of like the digital watches, and I believe it was Pulsar in 72, maybe, released the first ever sort of digital watch. So that wasn't much after that, really, when you think about it that way.
Yeah, well, let's. I'm really interested to talk about Casio because it definitely got me into watches when I was a kid. But a bit about, I don't think there's anybody that's not familiar with Casio, but just a bit about them. They've been going since 1946, and originally they were known for creating the fully electric calculators, which of course, like, I even remember them at school, and they still predominantly make those calculators, and of course they went into all sorts, musical instruments, digital cameras and everything. But when I was a kid, and this was sort of, I'm aging myself here, but 80s, early 90s, it was a real heyday for Casio. I feel like that every watch that came out was like a revolution. I think the technology they were putting into watches in those days.
Absolutely amazing stuff, and it's got everything that you need for every single day. A lot of those watches have, because you don't really need more than what's in some of them. I mean, obviously some of these super expensive models, they absolutely turbocharge them, don't they, and pack them with everything under the sun, including stuff that unless you're a fighter pilot, you probably will never use.
Yeah, exactly. I think when I was a kid, I remember I had a friend who had the one that had the put your finger on it and it would measure your pulse. Have you seen that one?
No, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah,
No.
this was probably 2 decades before the Apple Watch. I think it had a light sensor in it that you held your finger on, and it would take your pulse for you. I'll throw up a picture here for the
Unbelievable
video.
I didn't think that sort of technology. I didn't even know that existed now, apart from in like the latest smartwatches, sort of the last 8 to 10 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, they had that one, and then of course the watch that. Well, there was 2 watches that I always wanted from Casio, and first was one that was the original one that had all the sensors on it, the barometer, the compass, and the altimeter on it. And then the one that I did get, and I keep toying with the idea of buying it again, is the TV remote control watch.
Would that still work in 2021? Would it still be the same technology so you can change the channel? Or not?
I mean, I think
surely
it
evolved
would.
a bit.
It was infrared. I think it was infrared. And I know some of the Apple TVs and that are using like a Bluetooth low energy, aren't they, at the moment? Yeah, I guess it would work. I think the thing that was so pioneering about it was have you ever seen one of these? Do you know how it worked?
No, I can't say I've ever seen one of them. I've seen all sorts, but I can't say I've seen one of them now.
It looked like a bigger version of the calculator watch. And in fact, it was also a calculator watch. And it had preset sort of schemas in it, I suppose, or profiles for a TV. But if your TV wasn't there, you could actually program it by holding your TV remote control up against the watch, and you would press the corresponding. It was like a revolution at the time. You press the corresponding buttons and it would learn. So it would read the signal and program itself, and then you could do it. So this led to much mischief on when it was like a rain day and you were watching TV at school, or they put one of those educational films on, because it would also do anything that was, you could program it to do anything that was infrared.
All sorts of ways to troll the teachers, isn't there?
Yeah, I remember.
Any way possible, and also to cheat on maths tests as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember definitely putting the volume up and down and really being mischievous with the TV in school. But at the time, it was. I keep toying with the idea of buying another one just for nostalgia reasons, but they go for a lot of money now, $200 or $300 on eBay.
There's so many models as well. Would you be able to find the exact one again? Like, there's like thousands of Casios, isn't there? They spam these things out like non-stop, and it's got to the stage where that might not actually be helping like too much in the modern digital age, like with tons and tons of models, because they still kind of do that. They're still like releasing tons of models and then not really marketing any of them, and relying on channels like ours to like promote the watches.
Yeah, it's definitely weird, isn't it? So we'll try and frame this up a bit. So let's talk about. I just did a bit about old school Casio, but I think of Casio in 3 distinct areas. There's the digital watches they have. Then there's the extremely affordable analog watches, and then you've got obviously a Casio Edifice, and then we can't talk about Casio without talking about G-Shock. I know your sweet spot is the affordable digital and analog one. So what originally drew you to that, to the point where you started making watch content on those ones?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, actually, because that was one of my very first videos. I think it was the first video on the Ben's Watch Club channel was about the A158, which is like the original looking silver one. It's like the most successful silver one. It's the equivalent to the F91, but silver, basically, with slightly different lugs. It's been one that I always wanted, because I like the kind of retro look, which has come back somewhat with some of these Netflix shows and stuff like that. The retro looks come back into fashion. And also, my dad always had an F91 anyway, and his finally broke at some point just before then, and it was the black F91. And then he was like, "Oh, can you find me another one of these on Amazon Prime?" And I was like, "Oh, okay then, Dad," because he doesn't have an Amazon Prime account and he's not exactly internet savvy. So I went on, and I just found like there's thousands of different options for these Casios. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to make some sort of watch channel, there's like a million to choose from on here as well. And I know the last 20 odd years, like that one previously did with my dad's, the 20 years out of an F91 without breaking, and it ran out of battery, I think, once or twice during the entire 20 years, and he replaced it, and then it finally went something to do with the display, finally died off. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to get him one, and I'm going to get one as well. I'm going to get the silver looking one, and it kind of snowballed from there because for the price, they're unbeatable. It must be some of the objective, like, best value for money, like, per dollar compared to lots of other watches, even though other watches have got better features, better build quality. It's hard to beat a Casio.
The F91 is, I think, it's so legendary. I remember it fading away, and then early 2000s when they came out with the metal versions, I feel like there was a huge resurgence in that vintage sort of nostalgia for the 80s and 90s with them.
Yeah, the benefit with the silver ones is they're just a lot more wearable and more versatile with day-to-day stuff. I mean, I guess on a versatility level, in terms of practicality at least, the black version is probably superior because I guess there's the old adage, it goes with everything. And yeah, the silver ones, it's no wonder to me that they're so popular because they have a bit more of that retro look about them with the silver and then all the different bright colours, and they're a bit more versatile and they look less dad-like than the black ones. I think the black resin ones, they look cheaper, and while they're more practical, they don't stand out as much, so it's no wonder that the youngsters have been jumping on all these silver ones because they're equally as cheap, really. And my gosh, do they rip out the arm hairs, but we can talk about that one later.
One that I found surprising on your channel that I'd not seen before is there's a slim version of the watch, isn't there?
Almost. So yeah, they do a recently released one, I think 2019 it came out. The A700, I'm guessing that's the one you're thinking of. Super thin. It must be at least a third thinner than the F91. And it's really nice and sleek. That's probably my favourite one overall out of the Casio digital ones because it looks nice and sleek. And I've always thought if you can have a battery-powered watch, you might as well make it look as slim and sleek as possible, really. It's the advantage of the technology, isn't it?
I don't know if they were the first, but I remember them having watches that had 5-year battery lives and things like that. They really like optimized the digital functionality to be like low energy before that was even a thing, I feel like.
Yeah, they've got insane battery life, some of them, although to be honest, that model, I think it's a bit less than average. It's only about 3 years, but some of the others, they say they really do this, Casio. They underpitch some of the specs sometimes. They say it's like 5-year battery life, but you'll see countless instances of them lasting 15 years on the battery. And then in other cases with the water resistance, they'll only label them all at 3 bar. I don't know whether that's to cover themselves in case someone's breaks. I'm not sure. But then you'll see people scuba diving in them. So they obviously perform slightly better than that.
We'll get to one of their dive watches in a minute, but before we leave the kind of Casio digital thing, their use in pop culture is, I mean, they'll be forever known as the calculator watch. They'll be forever known as Back to the Future, and it's incredible that they still make that model. It's still a production model, that calculator one.
Well, it's really good. It shows that at least in some cases, they're sticking with the ones that sell the best, because that doesn't always seem to be the case either. Sometimes they just randomly discontinue ones that people found popular, and we've seen that with other brands as well, haven't we? Like Seiko have been known to do that repeatedly, which is frustrating as a consumer. Maybe it makes them more money. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's iconic is definitely the word to go with, isn't it? Yeah, they're so iconic that maybe even in another 20 years they'll still be making them, even though the people buying them then will never have seen these movies in the 80s or never have been born. I mean, I was born in 93 and I still got it, so it says something, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then they had the calculator one, and then when they went with the data bank watches, which they still produce today, but they've I think this is one of the themes with Casio, is they still make watches that you think would have been surpassed by other watches. Like the data bank, you think an Apple Watch does far more than that, but they're obviously still making them and knocking them out at $50 or something, which is incredible for those.
I wonder if the target market's maybe like less developed countries or some of them, potentially. Yeah. I'm not sure, because although they are considered like the original smartwatch, aren't they, Casio's, given the massive functionality, but it will be interesting to see the demographics of where they're selling and how they change, which is something really interesting, because me and Phoebe, we look at different countries and what they're selling in different countries on like Amazon and whatever websites, and it varies massively, especially with some of the more affordable brands. The ranges and also the individual styles are quite substantially different from area to area. There's plenty in India, for example, that you'd just never see in the US or the UK. So I wonder if maybe they're targeting less developed areas who could then afford one of them, where they might not be able to afford like an Apple Watch, for instance.
Yeah, I remember I had one of those databank watches, and it was you could store phone numbers in it. Like, it was excruciating to put them in because you had to like tab through the letters and stuff. But
yeah, and then you got to remember as well, if you need to touch it ever again, you have to remember off the top of your head all the functions and which button to press in which order. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, it was so. I remember it just being so cool at the time, and I was I was probably, I don't know, a 12 or something when I had one. So all this idea of storing information on a watch, I felt like sort of a James Bond or something like that, with a really cool, like, multifunctional watch. I think that was the cool thing with Casios, is it made you feel like a bit of a spy. I think some of the advanced functionality that they had on them.
Go gadget watch. Feels like you got a computer on your wrist to a limited extent, I suppose. Especially back then. Especially
back then, where that was pre like Palm Pilots and pre, the Apple Newton and all sorts of stuff. But well, so we've covered the digital stuff now. One of the and I don't know whether it's because we're sort of watch YouTubers and we're in a lot of watch forums. One of the entry-level dive watches that Casio do, if you've got one, then you know how good they are, but they don't. Casio Duro, I think, could possibly be the best value dive watch across any brand, let alone Casio.
Absolutely, especially for the price. I mean, it's a shame we can't get it cheaper in the UK. It's must only be $40 to $60 in the US, Am I right? Whereas in the UK, it's more like closing in on £100, which is quite a substantial difference, but even at that price, it's not a bad watch. And that's the thing that's really saying something with the level of the finishing, which was hilarious. I put that watch, I reviewed a Filippo Loretti, and I compared the finishing on that watch to a Casio Duro, which was a fifth of the retail price. And they were spouting how their finishing was so incredible. Put it up against this Casio. Casio blows it out the water, and it's a fifth of the cost. So it's not just like the function with some of their watches either. Like, some of them have pretty good finishing for the price as well. It's not just that they're made of steel, for instance, or that they've got a certain type of glass. They actually look nice as well, some of them.
Oh yeah, that Duro that I reviewed on the channel had brushing and polishing on the case, which you associate with a luxury watch. I don't understand why they went to the effort of doing it. I mean, it looks cool, and I'm glad they did, but like a lot of other brands would make a real song and dance about it.
I mean, I'd love to see what other ones they could release, because I'm not aware of that many dive watches. I did a dive watch roundup recently, and Casio was one of the brands featured, and I only found one other that was dive style kind of watch. It was only 100 meters. I say only 100 meters water resistance, as if anyone listening to this goes scuba diving, but it wasn't quite as bulky and chunky. That was an Edifice one, which was really nice as well. But apart from that, I really struggled to find, that many other Casios. I was looking myself to see if I could pick one up, because I'd like a smaller option. They make so many of these smaller watches, don't they? Like 35 mil, sometimes 38 mil, especially with the smaller digitals. I wish that they made a diver, like a 39 mil diver. It would be incredible.
Yeah, they seem to have. Seiko seems to have taken that mantle. Of course, Citizen as well. That's their thing, isn't it? The Pro Master type watches that they have at that entry level point, that quartz dive watch.
I think Casio could take some of the market share if they just made more. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't, because the Duro is so popular. Why would you not want to release like a not necessarily a better version, but maybe a more updated version with a different dial on it or something, or in a slightly different shape, tool sized case? I think that would go down really well.
I totally agree with you, actually. It's one of the confusing things I think about Casio is that, well, first of all, they were such a pioneer technology-wise, even up until very, very recently when the first Edifice watches came out and they had the Bluetooth sync on them. I mean, I had one of those and it worked pretty well, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised that they haven't gone into as far as I know, they haven't gone into like smartwatches, have they? Casio?
Well, yeah, they have. But the reason you've not heard about them is they largely flopped. ProTrek watch, and they really had a good go at it. They had a couple of models, but you can even there's if anybody's not familiar, there's a Casio have their own sort of clearance website, and they were knocking. I mean, originally they were $500, and they were practically giving them away by the end. I think this is one of the things that I think is really confusing about the brand. They were such pioneers in technology, but then when the technology came knocking at their door, the smartwatch, they just didn't do a good job of it. But maybe they don't need to. What do you think? Maybe they don't.
Maybe they don't currently. This is one of the things that it's painful to say with some of these older watch brands, especially the more affordable ones. Those that have been around delivering the best value for the longest time. Are the new generations going to be buying these watches? I mean, that's kind of a little bit what my channel is trying to do as well, is trying to get new people into watches, into good watches as well, not the complete garbage that you see all over social media. And I'm slightly concerned that a lot of young people aren't going to go for like a Casio, and that the audience for them over time may well be dying off. At the moment, you may still have the other markets in the world, like I mentioned before, so maybe they're still getting plenty of sales in international markets where they may not have been like 30, 40 years ago. But I certainly think that they need to step up their design. I've noticed finally in the UK, I think we're able to buy directly from the Casio website now, which I don't know if you've had that in the US before, but that was definitely only a recent thing in the UK. Before, the online website was a complete and utter disaster. You couldn't find anything. It was a mess. I mean, it still looks like something out of 2002, but I guess they're trying to make progress, but is it going to be fast enough? Because it's hyper competitive these days, not just in watches but in business.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is one of the other confusing things I feel like with Casio, is that they do such a good job, and even better than I would say almost any other brand that does outdoors watches, basically. But they do such a good job of G-Shock and promoting it. But they don't really do that with the ProTrek watches they have. Edifice to a certain extent they do, because they had that Red Bull partnership, which I'm sure was lucrative.
Yes, they did, yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. Other than that, when do you ever hear any marketing at all? And I know that product speaks for itself and all that stuff. And Casio watches are fantastic, but it's getting to the stage, I think, with lots of businesses, with all the economic troubles in the Western world, where maybe that isn't going to count for enough. It's got to be like desirable. And who's heard of Edifice outside of the watch community? I can't say any of my mates have heard of Edifice, even though they're great watches.
They are great watches. If you compare them, I suppose, against a similar competitor like Citizen with their Blue Angels tie-in and things like that, the marketing that they do around those watches it's night and day versus Casio, even though, as you say, the watches are a comparable quality. I'm the same, because it feels like some of the watches that for Casio do really well, they kind of fell into it, like the F91 you mentioned.
Definitely. They got these like one-off successful watches, and they often don't follow up on them. I know they followed up a bit with the F91 over the course of a couple of decades, with random other variants and stuff. But if they land on a successful one, like the Duro, for instance, there was also this like minimalist one they released a few years back, and then they just discontinued it within what seemed like 12 months. That one got loads of traction, at least on my video, and there was not much chatter about it online because it received no marketing. And then they pulled the plug. I'm not sure how many sales they were getting, but they sold out instantly after my video went live, and now only had a few thousand subs. Like, people love the watch because it's like a Daniel Wellington, but for better specs for must have been a third of the price, maybe less.
Yeah, that was that was one of my videos, the videos that you did that I found really interesting, because I, like you, was amazed that Daniel Wellington was knocking out just very, very, very basic quartz watches from Alibaba, and yet you had a Casio that was Was it much cheaper? I know the specs
Oh, it
were
was
better.
significantly cheaper. I mean, it was, at the time, I think I bought mine for 38, 39 quid. Stainless steel, sapphire crystal, came with a leather strap, just a rubbish leather strap, but they're all rubbish, aren't they, these sorts of prices. Compared to Daniel Wellington, with stainless steel construction, worse crystal with just mineral, and with an equally bad strap. And depending on where you got it from, at the time they weren't available cheap on Amazon like they are now. I think nowadays you can get them for about 80 quid on Amazon in the UK, £80. But back then, you were talking minimum 150.
Yeah.
The cheapest you could get them, unless you bought them used. So that's a difference of 100. You can buy multiple of the other one then. You can buy almost 4 of them for the same price. And then they just discontinued it.
Yeah.
So it's a shame.
They've missed the boat with those, because a lot of the fashion watches, I feel like they could have done a much better job at them.
Yeah, it was a half-baked effort for sure. They've got a couple of others still left, but they're spec'd down versions. They don't look quite as good. And the advantage of that other one was it was nice and thin. And I think that's one of the things they could really play into, because lots of these youngsters, they like them as a fashion accessory, at least to start with, before they ever come into watches. And one of the things they always look for is to be nice and thin, because they don't want it to get in the way of their outfit. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, people who love G-Shocks, I guess, which are massive. But at least that, from what I saw, people tended to go for the thinner watches, and they haven't got that many left now because they just randomly discontinued them.
Yeah, I think they could take a leaf out of Timex's book, because I feel like Timex really invented itself again over the last couple of years.
Definitely. Yeah, Timex has completely reinvented itself. They're one of the only heritage brands, I think, that have done a good job with their social media over the course of since the last recession, really, since 2008, because that's when everyone had to book their ideas up. And they've finally been doing a good job online with social media, putting a marketing effort not just behind the flagship watch, but behind multiple watches as well. And they've all been selling.
I suppose we have to sort of cover this. And a brand of theirs, G-Shock, which is almost night and day versus the way they market that. I mean, originally G-Shock was made as a rugged outdoors watch. And I made this comment. I recently reviewed a Luminox, and I made this comment about Luminox, that they should take a kind of a page out of G-Shock's book, where make one that is fashionable as well as rugged. And I think that's what G-Shock really just ran with and crossed the boundary between outdoors adventure watch and fashion.
Yeah, and pop culture, absolutely, especially with the tons of colours they're releasing. You even see people with super thin wrists still wearing G-Shock. There's this YouTuber called Dave 2D who is often seen wearing a G-Shock, and he's really short and he's got a really thin wrist, but he don't care because he just wants to wear a G-Shock. So that shows people are buying it not just because they think it's a good product, they're buying it even if it isn't appropriate for their wrist size, really.
Yeah. So
it shows that their marketing must be working. And you're right with that other brand you mentioned. I think, to be fair, for big watches, I think Invicta do quite a good job, at least of the marketing. While I don't like any of their designs, a massive proportion of their designs I don't like, but they're selling in bucket loads from what I can tell, and they must be marketing them well, and they're big watches too, so there's plenty of inspiration out there for sure.
Yeah, and G-Shock is really... you'll find most watch collectors have at least one G-Shock in their collection, because the quality is there. They're affordable, although the prices have definitely been creeping up, haven't they, I feel like. And then they've jumped on this trend, which recent years is... I suppose is like a double-edged sword, but they jumped on this trend of having limited editions, haven't they? So we just had the John Mayer on Hodinkee limited edition G-Shock.
They know what they're doing, just like Timex have been doing as well with regards to that. It makes me just wonder why they don't try it with more. Maybe they think that they'd be spread too thin by promoting multiple lines, or maybe they think in the old way that they'd be cannibalizing sales from their other line, which is what lots of these companies think, isn't it? They think they're going to take away sales from their other products, which is a very amateurish way to think. You've got to want to take more of the pie, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of thing.
And the one thing that also that I don't think Casio have tried yet, except for with G-Shock, is what Seiko's doing with Grand Seiko. The G-Shocks now, there's some that are well over $1,000 dollars, isn't there? There's some that they've hand making almost, and they have special finishes they apply and
Master
stuff.
of G, one of them is, isn't it? I've seen that one for at least 800 because they're the ones with the supercharged features, even more water resistance and stuff like that.
Do you think they'd get away with something like that, a Casio, if they bought out a Casio watch that was similar to Grand Seiko, like exceptionally well finished, which we know they could do?
I think they could do that. Yeah, I mean, they'd struggle, obviously, getting people to part with that much money, maybe for a battery-powered watch, because they only do battery-powered watches, don't they? That would be the big hurdle, I think. They'd have to go into sort of mechanical, because I think it's the same audience, isn't it? You're talking people who are willing to spend, £5,000 on a watch. They're probably going to be the same audience that appreciates horology and this craftsmanship and everything to do with the super high levels of finishing that you get with a mechanical watch, which you just can't get with an electrical circuit, can you?
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah. Because even Citizen has they obviously own Miyota. They have that mechanical dive watch. I can't remember what it is, but that's in excess of $500. So I think they could really, really do it. But I mean, we don't know the inner workings of the company. Maybe they have more than enough watches that they make, and they're making more than enough money to.
Probably. I mean, the most expensive one I've seen was the Oceanus range, I think it is. Although I've never tried one. I think they were around 1,000. I think that's the most expensive. And then there's outside of G-Shock, if you're just talking the main Casio lines, there's a big drop then until you get to the next range, which is kind of the ones I've got on here, which are substantially lower, tend to be 300 and below, depending on the model. So there's certainly a gap in their offerings from what I've seen. It'd be interesting to see if they could fill that.
What do you think, from what you've seen, what do you think's the best bang for buck watch that Casio make? Is it the one that you're wearing at the moment?
Possibly, it is possibly the one I'm wearing. Either that or one of the dirt cheap digitals. That's what it's got to be. Either the A700 or one of the digitals that's got a good backlight, because most of them have got a garbage backlight, or one like this Lineage, just because it's packed full of features. It's got everything you could kind of need that would help you practically, and it also looks really good and it's really comfortable. And I don't mind that it's battery powered essentially, or cell powered, I guess, because it's solar as well. So yeah, this watch just feels like really good value for money. I feel great wearing it because I feel like I've got a parking and it's only 180 quid or something.
We'll talk through the specs, because if anybody's not, and this is one of the things with your channel, is you highlight these watches that I don't think anybody else is really focusing on, certainly that I've seen. But just, I mean, that watch has got insane specs, hasn't it? Would you mind just going
absolutely.
through it?
This is my talent, you see, Sam, finding these obscure watches with really good specs that no one's ever talked about. So this one has, let me think, solar powered. It's got radio control functionality, so it synchronizes with the atomic clock, so it's perfectly accurate. There's alarms, there's countdown timers, in fact, let me even go through. You can see the power level meter on it, world time. God, I can't even remember because there's that many. How bad's that? And then there is a few more as well. It's got an LED backlight on it, which is not the greatest, to be fair. But overall, it's got reasonable water performance. Sapphire crystal. I'm pretty sure it was sapphire. Yeah, sapphire crystal as well. What more can you ask for that sort of price outside of a mechanical movement if you wanted one of them? But good luck getting them features with an automatic watch.
Yeah. So and how much is it? 180.
At the time of making that video, I think it was retailing for about 180 on Amazon at least, which isn't bad. I think it's gone up to about 220 since making the video, but it'll probably come back down over time. It's just because they have the adaptive pricing, don't they, on loads of these sites now. So inevitably, when it gets popular, then the price goes up, at least for a short term.
Yeah, and it's fully titanium with a titanium bracelet.
Yes.
As well.
Sorry, completely forgot about the material. Yeah, fully titanium bracelet. It might scratch a bit easier than steel, but for me it's worth the trade-off, to be fair, especially for a Casio. You're not going to be cradling this like it's a Rolex, are you? So it doesn't matter if it gets a few scuffs. I'd rather take the lightweightness.
You don't get a custom bracelet fitted end links, or even on that Omega that's $9,000.
No, there you go. No.
Yeah, so this has been like a fascinating. Casio's not one. I mean, I cover that Duro just because. How can you not? I mean, the value prop on those is like,
it's a £140 watch for £40 essentially in the US at least.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then I hope that Casio does kind of seize the day. Even that G-Shock, that one that's affectionately called the Casio, I feel like they stumbled into that one. I don't think they realised how popular.
I'm not sure they intended on it. No, I'm not sure they intended on it. I found another Edifice watch that looks maybe even more like the Royal Oak, which I'm sure you'll see on the channel at some point. That's like a much thinner one, actually. It's not bad compared to the massive thickness of the Casio. But yeah, I agree. I think they definitely stumbled into that. I'm not sure that was intentional because it's just so much bigger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Than a Royal Oak. It's enormous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's thin. It's thin for a G-Shock, but it's definitely thicker than the AP Royal Oak. But I like the way that, I mean, they sort of seized on it a little bit. I suppose I should give them some credit because they did make a metal version, because the originals were G-Shock, sort of the rubber G-Shock material. And then suddenly AliExpress was like covered in aftermarket kits.
The kits, yeah. They could custom your own one, yeah. And it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah, it was. I don't understand the G-Shock, the ones that they make that are metal. They seem to be quite expensive, don't they? So it kind of encourages people down there.
Maybe that's what they're trying to do with that gap, like I mentioned before, in their repertoire. Maybe that's why they're making them all metal, to try and fill that space with some that are worth, like, in some cases, up to £500-600.
Yeah,
which is crazy, isn't it? But I have found there is another Casio, like not a G-Shock, but it's one of these regular brand Casios that looks a lot like a G-Shock, that's got metal on it around the outside and the rubber sort of shock inner, and it's about £50, and it looks just like a metal G-Shock.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah. Only thing it's missing is the G-Shock logo, essentially, from what I can tell. I guess it probably doesn't have exactly the same technology inside and all the bits and bobs, but it's as close as anyone would need to, unless you fancy like cliff diving or something.
I suppose this episode was a bit of a love letter to Casio as well. I know we've given them a little bit of a hard time, but I think it's just the best way to get into watches, because the quality's there, the price.
Buy a whole range of them for one, like, other cheap watch, not even a luxury watch. You can, for the cost of one other cheap watch, you can buy like 5 of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's unbeatable value. I can't think of a better company, and they seem reasonably ethical, apart from some of the construction in China, obviously, which is never going to be super ethical. But they're all at it anyway, aren't they? So you can't exactly compare them. I still think overall they offer the best value, and they're not lying in the marketing either.
No, they're not at all. Yeah, and if this G-Shock that this Casio that my granddad had,
that's a small G-Shock, Sam.
Yeah, I know. But this, outlived my grandfather. I mean, he had it up until and he absolutely. I mean, I remember him. This was not a draw kind of watch. He wore this every single day, and it's even got one of those, what you would think of the cheap bracelets on it, but it's probably lasted certainly longer than I imagine a lot of other brands. But yeah, I mean, that's been really interesting. A bit of a love letter to Casio, and guys, we'd love to know what you think. What was your first Casio or your first watch, and do you still have it? Because I certainly don't still have mine.
I still have mine, my first Casio. It's a terrible Casio, to be fair. That one is some hideous boys Casio that my mum got me when I was a kid.
Oh,
and it's
cool.
awful.
Yeah.
I should imagine if I featured that one on the channel. I'm not sure that one would get 100,000 views, would it? Well, 100 views.
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to have to be very careful with after this episode is not to search online for like the remote control watch, because I'll be able to find one on eBay and then I'll just be obsessing about them, or I'll end up with a load of old Casio watches. But anyway, Ben, I really appreciate you joining us on this episode.
Cheers, Sam. Thank you so much for having me in the Casio celebration, shall we say, from your number one Casio fanboy right here.
All right, guys. Well, really appreciate you listening and watching, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.